Hi, I'm Lily,
I'm Connor.
and today we're going to be discussing the most important virtue and which one is the most important virtue. I chose humility as the most important one.
And I chose diligence as the most important one.
Okay, and we're going to start with a quick definition of both. I said the virtue of humility, most simply defined, is an accurate assessment of oneself, and that's quoted from On Reading Well on page 225.
And I said that diligence is the persistent effort in every task and everything you do in life.
Okay, and why do you think diligence is the most important virtue?
I think that diligence is the backbone of every virtue, because if you're not diligent in a virtue, then you aren't well versed or well connected to that virtue.
Okay, I think humility is the most important virtue because you can't have a virtue without humbling yourself, because you have to have an accurate assessment of yourself in order to grow in that virtue and to know where you are in life.
I think that you need diligence to be have that virtue, because yes, you can be humble, but I also believe that to stay humble, you need to be diligent in that virtue. So you can be humble for times, but to stay always humble, you need to be diligent in that virtue.
Okay, well, diligence also involves knowing what you're doing right and what you're doing wrong, because if you're doing it wrong, you can be diligent in doing a virtue completely wrong. You can be diligent in doing a vice. Diligence doesn't mean necessarily good or bad. It just means that you're consistent with something. So humility, knowing how to accurately assess yourself, can lead to knowing if you're being diligent in a vice or being diligent in a virtue.
Well, that's true, but the virtue diligence is being diligent in a spiritual task, so being in a good task. If I'm diligent in a bad task, I'm not being virtuously
How would
diligent.
you know if it's a bad task or a good task without humility and knowing how to assess yourself?
Because I think you're confusing humility with morals. You can have a good moral compass to know right between wrong while still not being humble.
Yes.
And I'm not saying that humble isn't important, but I'm saying that to be always humble, you need to be diligent in that virtue.
This is true. Maybe they both connect. Maybe they both work together for the other virtues, but it still doesn't take away from the fact that humility is the first thing you need. It's the first step in it's the first step in having a virtuous life.
I can see that.
Yeah.
But I just don't think that. I think, yes, you can be humble, but you can't always keep yourself at a humble, you can't always keep yourself humble without diligence.
Yes.
If that makes sense.
Okay, the one question is, we were supposed to write one sentence connecting this passage to a broader theme of the good life today.
Okay.
So, how do you think your virtue connects to the good life? And we'll compare it and see which one is more connected to the good life.
I think that diligence is the most essential to attaining the good life, because you need diligence to be. You need to be diligent in every single virtue to have that virtue all the time. Yeah. I think to be truly virtuous, you need to be diligent in those virtues. And I think that all the virtues have something you can't have you can't. I believe that you can't have diligent. You can't have the rest of the virtues without being diligent, and you think that you can't have the rest of the virtues without being humble.
Yeah.
And I agree with both of them, but I think that diligence is more important in the fact that you need to be diligent in those virtues. You need to actually try to have those virtues and put effort into always being virtuous, rather than sometimes being virtuous and being lazy, and sometimes or the vice of just sloth.
Yeah.
And just being whatever,
So I think they do work together on some level, but I do think that humility is more important, just because it's just the foundation. And if you think about to relate it to the Bible, God he sacrificed his son, but it was the biggest form of humility. And why would he display such why would he display that virtue among like all the others if it wasn't like as important? What I'm trying to get at is like, how do you think Jesus or God displays diligence in our life today?
I think that yes, it's easier to look at how they display like being humble, because they are the Almighty Lord and they bring themselves down to our level to like. And I think that is like, I get what you're trying to say in that aspect, but I also believe that it's important because they do all that while giving effort to do that stuff. So they go down and give effort to reach to our hearts and to like speak to us and give their life and share their life with us and share the gospel with us, you know?
Yeah.
And they're being diligent in that fact that they are putting an effort to do this.
Yeah.
So yes, they are. And I think that it's easier to see where they're being humble rather than being diligent, because being humble is a lot easier to see when people are humble rather than when people are diligent. Like you never get compliments on, oh, you're so diligent. Like that never happens. But you get compliments on being humble, correct?
Yeah.
So I think that being humble is easier to see than being diligent, but I also believe that being diligent is like the behind the scenes that you need to do to have all those virtues.
Yeah. But like in all of their acts, like, or in all of like Jesus's acts on earth, like him like saving us, him like going to like all the diseased people and like healing them, and like still today, like all of their actions, like their diligence that you're talking about and like continuing to like be there for us or whatever, that's still like they're being humble. They're practicing humility by like caring for like a species, I guess, like that it's so less than them. Like we're like not on the same level as God. So by helping us and like caring for us, they are humbling themselves.
This might be like a bad example, but like the way I see it is like, let's say you have a dog and you can humble yourself to be on like the same level as a dog and think and love the dog like most people do. Like you love your cats and you have a dog, right?
Nope.
No, you don't have a dog. Okay, well, you love your cats and you like care for them, but if you weren't diligent in caring for them, then they wouldn't be very well taken care of, correct?
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's how I see it as like God. Like God is diligent in taking care of us and loving us and caring for us. And I think that's important to like look at. That is the most important thing, because if he didn't try to take care of us, then all the other things that like you see about like healing, all that, he wouldn't care as much. He wouldn't try as much effort. And with like Jesus dying on the cross and coming back to life, like I doubt he would have done that if he wasn't putting in so much effort to care for us, you know?
Yeah. Okay, so I have another question. So why do you think like, so obviously you think diligence is the best virtue. So like, why would you think that being called diligent is like a better compliment than being called humble?
Really, it comes down to being humble is more of a, like, you get compliment on that more, whereas people don't really see diligence. Like, being humble is a kind of outward appearance. Listen, it's not really appearance. It's like you know what I'm saying? But like, people see it more rather than being diligent. So if someone calls you like, oh, you're so diligent in this or something like that, I'm going to take that like much more as, oh, I'm doing it well because they see me and they see like me putting in effort, rather than, oh, you're so humble, which kind of comes off as like, well, like so many people are humble, but not like so many people get confident on being humble, but not many people get confident on being diligent.
Yeah, but like I feel like diligence without humility can just turn into like cockiness and like arrogance, because if you're so diligent and like your sport, you're practicing every day, like you're relying too much on yourself, like hypothetically you're not a Christian, you're just always relying on yourself. And like when people compliment you and being diligent in your sport, you're like letting it go to your head and you're like, yeah, I am diligent. And it's like you are good, you're allowed to say like, yeah, I'm good at my sport, but like once that turns into like you think you're better than all the other people, then I think that's like where humility is needed in order to be diligent, like truly diligent.
I see your argument, but like the way I see it, I think you're confusing the difference between being good at something and being diligent in something. Like you can be diligent in something but not be good at it. So like being diligent is just putting in effort, so people see that effort. It's not like you're always going to be good at something you're diligent in.
Yeah, but like you could be cocky about like always trying, like a try hard, like You could be like seen as a try hard in every single way. You're not necessarily good, but if people like are saying, yeah, like I can see your effort or whatever, you're like, yeah, I'm better than all the other people because I actually like work for what I do. Like I feel like I've heard that so many times. Like I'm better than them because they were like gifted with that talent and I actually worked for mine, and then it like goes to their head. So I don't know.
But that's only if you're excelling at that thing you're being diligent in. If I'm being super diligent in like math, but I have a B compared to someone who doesn't try at all, but is gifted in that aspect and has an A, I'm not going to be as cocky and like, oh wow, like I'm much better than you because I'm not better than you.
I feel like a lot of people excuse not being the best with like say you're not the best one on the team and someone says, yeah, no, I think so-and-so is the best one. And you're like, yeah, but they like were just gifted. Like I actually work for it. Like I know I'm not the best, but like I actually put in like 10 times more work than them. And then they're like cocky in that sense. Like they accept that they're not the best on the team, but then they use excuses like, well, I work harder and all of that to like dismiss. I don't know. That's what I'm kind of getting at.
Now, I'm going to try to flip the argument here. What if you're humble in something, but you're not diligent in it? So let's say on a football team, you're humble and you know you're not the best and you say you're not the best, but you never try to be the best and you never try to put effort into being good at that. So if I say, oh, I'm a Christian, like humble myself down to like I'm a follower of God, like I'm below God, but I never actually put an effort to being a Christian. I don't go to church. I don't do any like some, and that aspect, that's the way I see that you need diligence to put in that effort that is needed in the fact that you are like a follower of Jesus and you like worship Jesus, and you need to be diligent in the fact that you give effort into following Jesus.
Yeah, but like to tie it into Bible times, the Pharisees were very known for being diligent and praying and being like the most like, you know, like best Christians for, I don't know, that's what they thought they were. But they weren't like God's chosen people. Like they was the people that were like doing the work for God and like actually getting there. Like they were humble and they didn't think of themselves as like, oh, I'm better than everyone else because I'm doing everything and being diligent in what God told me to do, because Christianity is about like your heart, not about your actions.
I agree with you on that, but I think that if your actions aren't like representing your heart, then your heart's not really in it. Like I don't see how someone can be a full like Christian, but never show and never give effort into loving God. Like yeah, you can humble yourself down to actually like loving God, and think you're a Christian. But I think an important fact in Christianity is bring yourself to do these things to actually like spread the gospel like God says.
Yeah.
And the Pharisees is a good example of your argument because they put in a bunch of effort into showing people they're Christian.
Yeah.
But weren't actually like followers of Jesus and we're really cocky, and we're not humble at all.
Yeah.
But there's also the other side of the coin, which is you can be diligent, which is not much seen in the Bible, but it's seen a lot nowadays, whereas people say they're Christian, but still go out and do these things that aren't Christian and never do things that are Christian.
I think where it gets confusing is like you have to be both. Like you can't be one without the other. So then it's like kind of arguing like which one is better, but it's like how is one better without the other, which is kind of like it's tricky because humility is like the first step you need, but like humility without diligence and humility becomes just like it's just like, yeah, you got the first step there, but now you're just stuck there and you're not like doing anything. You're not acting on the things you believe and all that stuff. So I think it's like, it's a hard argument. So I get where you're coming from with that, but yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, on page 183 of the book On Reading Well, it talks about the trials and tribulations of the virtue of diligence and how you have to power through and have diligence in your virtue and trust God. I believe that diligence kind of gets forgotten among the virtues, even though I believe it is the most important one. Because if you aren't diligent in those other virtues, then they will, like, yes, you can have the virtues, but I believe that they will fall apart.
Yeah.
They will slowly, if you're not always diligent in that, they will slowly, like, go down and you will forget them if you're not diligent in it.
But Didn't the book say that about every single one?
More or less, but I think that diligence is the most important fact because I think you can be diligent, you can be humble,
Yes.
but you will lose that, you know? But if I'm always diligent in a Christian kind of way, in like I'm talking about like a virtuous way, not always diligent in like what we think that what like the actual definition is, but be virtuously diligent, that kind of shows more of like you will always bring yourself down to that level to be diligent and help others and put an effort to helping others.
Yeah.
And put an effort to sharing the gospel. Because I don't think anybody really that puts in a huge amount of effort to share the gospel is completely cocky and thinks they're the best.
Yeah. I think, well, in mega churches and like all those like pastors that just like take all of the money from their congregation and like convince them that it's for like the betterment of the Christian faith or whatever, but then they're just like buying private jets and stuff like that, but they're like a big face and like they talk and they spread the gospel, they truly do God's work, but like they're spending God's money on themselves and it's like secret. So it's like I think you can do the work of God to the fullest extent and like gather tons of money, but you can still be like in the wrong place because they're not humbling themselves.
I see where your argument is, and that makes a lot of sense. But I also think that that's not very diligent, and that's not very spiritually diligent.
Yeah.
Like you're not being very spiritually diligent in that aspect because you are kind of selfishly giving yourself money and buying stuff, and that's not diligently representing God.
Yeah. Okay, to bring in a reliable source, I found this on Merriam-Webster. I just looked up the definition of humility, and it's more of like this is obviously a very secular website. It's not like biblical in any way, so I figured it would be a good like common ground. And it quotes The Economist on the 26th of January 2013. I'm sure it's from an article. It says, if leadership had a secret sauce, it may well be humility. A humble boss understands that there are things he doesn't know. He listens not only to the other bigwigs in Davis, but also to the kind of people who don't get invited, such as his customers. And I think this is literally like the perfect example of God, because it's like God is our, like, obviously is our boss, but he doesn't like choose other people above other people. He everyone's equal to him until like the final days, obviously, but everyone's equal. Everyone is his child. And I think it's just like humility is God, like in the truest form.
And I kind of think that, like, I see your argument. It makes a lot of sense. But I also think that you're forgetting that, like, I think all these virtues are God in form. And I think that, like, being humble is a huge aspect of God. Mm-hmm. But I think that many people see that aspect rather than the diligence because of how outward it is and how much you can see it.
Yeah.
Rather than I think diligence is more behind the scenes of, like, more of the behind the scenes of what God does. Mm-hmm. And you don't really see that in God, even though if you think about it, everything God does is diligent.
Yeah.
He does it in a diligent way that puts effort into loving us.
Yeah.
Because if he didn't put effort into loving us, I think he would give up.
Yeah.
Because you can see all through the Bible, we're pretty hard to love.
Yeah. Well, okay, wait. I'm going to say one more thing on that. And so I think there is an importance that, like, God and Jesus, they, like, there's a reason why humility is so prominent in the Bible. Maybe the reason why it's so outwardly and so commonly mentioned in the Bible is because it's the most important. Like, why would he be spending so much time mentioning humility? And, like, along with love, like, he mentions love a ton of times in the Bible. Like, I feel like he's pointing out, like, the most important things with repetitiveness.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I agree with you on that, or I don't agree with you on that, but, like, I can see where you're coming from that. But, like, I think that the reason they talk about humility so much is because it's what they see the most. It's not like God wrote the Bible. It's the fact that people wrote the Bible.
Yeah, but the people were inspired by God.
And I know that, but they are inspired by what they see by God and what God tells them.
Yeah,
But,
God
like,
told them what to write.
But he didn't tell them in exact words what to write. He just said, share my gospel. And so I think they see the humility in God more than they see the diligence in God, because, again, diligence is more behind the scenes. So they are more inclined to talk about humility rather than diligence.
Okay.
Because they see that more often.
Okay. Well.
And I think that God being diligent makes him so reliable and dependable. And that's why people, like, subconsciously are more inclined to trust God, because of how diligent he is and how much effort he puts in makes him more dependable. In an article called The Virtue of Diligence by Anne DeSantis, she talks about how having diligence makes you dependable and reliable, and also means that you do things right the first time and you don't cut corners and you don't bend the rules. And also goes hand in hand with how many other virtues, like patience. Like, you can see the diligence in God and how he doesn't cut corners and he doesn't cheat his way through things. Like, he does stuff the right way the first time. He doesn't like do things lazy. Everything he does in a diligent way and puts an effort to doing that thing.
Yeah. Okay, based off that, I'm kind of just thinking, like, about how God, like, he brought himself down to our level. He humbled himself, and he wouldn't have been able to be diligent and not cut corners and not, like, be a good God and, like, who he is without being humble. Like, in the same way, like, if he was humble, brought himself down to earth, he's still humbling himself just by being here. But, like, the fact that he was diligent in his actions and in his, like, works here, like, it made him who he was and made him, like, the reason why he was able to save us, I feel like. So it's just, like, I don't know, I feel like you can't have one without the other. So, like, yes, there's aspects in certain ways of life. I think in certain aspects humility is more important. In other aspects diligence is more important. It just kind of depends on, like, the situation. So I don't really think there's one better than the other. I think they have to be in unison in order to be, like, the complete version of each other. Like, you can't be diligent without humility. You can't be humble without diligence. So that's just what I think.
I see where you're coming from, and I agree with that, actually. I think that to be truly virtuously diligent, you need to humble yourself down to a level. Mm-hmm. And I think it also goes for vice versa. To be truly humble all the time, you have to be diligent in that fact that you are, like, you have to put effort into being humble.
Yeah.
And so I think that you can't really always have one without the other.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, I think that's a wrap for today. Good discussion. I think we made some good points, but yeah, at the end of the day, I think they're both needed for each other in order to be existent.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay. Bye, guys.
Bye, guys.
This episode has been a production of the Capistrano Valley Christian Schools Podcast Network. CVCS is a Christian TK through 12 school in San Juan Capistrano, California. Please visit cvcs.org/podcasts to listen to the variety of shows our students produce on our campus. You can also find all of our shows on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, and others. We would also appreciate you subscribing to and leaving a review of this show and the other shows on our network in your podcast player of choice. If you have any questions or would like to reach out to us, please email podcasts@cvcs.org. On behalf of the school, this is Mr. Jasper, the executive producer of the podcast network. Thank you for listening, and stay tuned for more.